Books about Arkansas, the Ozarks, Missouri Ozarks, and so whenever I go in a used bookstore, that's what I look for. And I found this book in a used bookstore in Fayetteville years ago. It's called Wide Meadows by Jean Bell Mosley, and she grew up in Elvins, Missouri. Does that ring a bell to you? It's in the southeastern Missouri Ozarks. And this is just a book of her memoirs, a little story. They're the sweetest stories. And they really, to me, capture, when I read these, this is how I remember it. This is kind of the feeling of the Ozarks that I look back on and remember growing up. So I want to read you one of her stories, not very long. It's called A Gift for Molly. You know, this story, I read it every excuse when I have a Christmas program. I try to read this story. And I read it the other day at a nursing home where I was doing a program, and I thought, oh boy, I don't know if I'll be able to keep their attention reading this story. And, oh my goodness, they loved it. They loved it, and the ladies especially just talked about it. Afterwards, we just talked about the story. So it's kind of there's something magical about this story, I think. A Gift for Molly. Winter comes down from the mountains in a white fury and locks the valley tight in its icy grip. The river slows and comes to a frozen stop. Icicles fringe the eaves of the buildings, and a tiny one hangs from Grandpa's mustache when he comes in from the barn. The pumps freeze. The wood box is in constant need of refilling, and we stamp and sputter and blow and allow in heavy understatement as how it is right smart cold outside. Old Nell and Maud make velvet whinnies in their stalls, and the cows, their shaggy winter hair pretending of bleak days ahead, munch tunnels far back into the haystacks. The cold north wind, rebuffed by batten windows, shakes the old house till it creaks and groans, and blows cold breath down the chimney ways. Then softly in the night comes the downy blanket of snow to mute the sounds and put soft white tam-o'-shanters atop the fence posts and old field stumps. By their comings and goings, furry animals with softly padded feet stitch together in the night the fields and roads and frozen streams as though the valleys were in danger of ripping apart. The word Christmas creeps into our conversation, and we begin early, wrapping glasses of jelly, buckets of maple syrup, and boxes of nuts. For some of the city folks may make just one more trip to the farm before Christmas. The roads afterwards will be well nigh impassable, and we will have their presents ready, however early they may come. Lou, you'll hear her talk, Lou is her sister. Lou and I begin to cast calculating eyes at cedar trees, choosing this one, discarding that one. There is a wealth to choose from. But we do not go after the tree until the last present is wrapped and tied. For Mama and Grandma, we have embroidered dresser scarves. For Sister Lillian, we have made blue and pink satin-covered garters, lace-trimmed. For Grandpa and Dad, we pool our pennies and purchase a fat pouch of tobacco. For each other, we may have Crayolas, a powder puff, or a can of violet-scented talcum powder. Grandma has been working long hours on her Passage of Time quilt, and at last it is in the frames ready to be quilted. But I remember all was not well with Grandma this particular Christmas. She was worried. Molly Layton was coming to the Christmas quilting party, and Grandma had no gift for her. For all the other ladies, Grandma had made little presents, lacy-edged handkerchiefs, quilted potholders, needle cases, patchwork pillow tops. But for Molly, she had made nothing, because she hadn't known Molly was coming. It had been more than a year now since Molly had worked for us and the other neighbor ladies, helping with the house cleaning, canning, and cooking. She had left as suddenly as she had come, and no one had heard from her since, not until now when Mrs. Stacy had called up on the day of the quilting party to ask if we remembered Molly Layton and to say that she was there at her house and wanted to come along to help with Grandma's Passage of Time quilt. We remembered Molly all right. One summer day she had walked in off the road, run-over shoes, skimpy faded dress, a large mole on her nose, straight sun-faded hair hooked behind her ears, and announced that she had come to do our sewing. When she spoke, we saw that one of her front teeth was missing. "But I do my own sewing," Mama had told her. "You must have the wrong place." "No, ma'am," she said, putting her hand over her mouth to hide the defect. "I'll do your cooking then." "Well," Mama faltered, puzzled at this strange girl, "we got plenty of cooks." She motioned to us girls and Grandma. "Well, how about your cleaning?" Molly said. Mama shook her head and said nothing. "Milking then, what about milking?" Molly asked. "Well, good land, we all of us milk," Mama said. Molly turned then and walked forlornly back to the gate. Her thin shoulders under the faded dress seemed to droop even lower, and we saw her wipe her arm across her eyes as she hooked her fallen hair back over her ear. "Now wait a minute," Mama called as Molly fumbled with the latch. "Come back here and have a bite of gingerbread and a glass of milk anyway." Molly blew her nose noisily and came back. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said apologetically for her tears, "but I sure do need a job." "Well, just sit and rest a while and have a bite to eat. You look plumb tuckered out," Mama said. "I guess I ought to be. I started out day before yesterday morning, and I've stopped at every house I've seen, and nobody wants any work done. And now I'm way out here in the country where houses are far apart." And the tears started again. "Well, where's your folks?" Mama asked. "Well, there's just me left, that's all." Molly gave a long, shivering sigh. "Well, we're canning beans tomorrow. Maybe you could help us," Mama said. So Molly stayed for the canning, and then the thrashers came, and she stayed to help cook, and then it was time to put up peaches. We couldn't pay her much, but she carefully hoarded her money. She was going to have that mole taken off her nose. She was going to have a new tooth put in and get some water wave combs for her hair. Of course, I could get the combs right away, but they wouldn't help much with this face. Ain't I the ugliest thing you ever seen? Molly would deride herself, trying to be happy about it and acting as if it didn't matter. But it hurt. You could tell that by the way she'd look at herself in the mirror, fluff her hair out speculatively, and then turn away. And she appreciated beautiful things. On Sundays, when we used Grandma's rose sprig china, she would hold the dish up to the light and say, "Ain't they the most beautiful things you ever seen?" She'd wipe the plates lovingly and stack them with tissue paper in between. She loved our silver spoons and the old clock with its jewel-like pendulum, and she would fondle the rose-in-glass paperweight as a child would hold a doll. But over Grandma's passage of time quilts, Molly went into ecstasy. These quilts were Grandma's way of keeping a history of family and friends. There were 24 blocks to a quilt, each one depicted in an applique and embroidery the most interesting events that had happened in our lives as time went by. She drafted her own designs, for she was good at drawing, and sometimes the completed block would be intricate beyond all reason and as complicated as a mosaic tile. Take the time the bull butted Grandpa into the river and jumped in after him. There were 3 scenes in this one quilt block. Grandpa standing on the riverbank innocently fishing, Grandpa halfway across the river, the bull in hot pursuit, and Grandpa climbing a tree on the other side, water dripping from his clothing in the form of blue French knots, and a satin-stitched blue jay perched in a tree watching.